Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the stickiest, rowdiest, most questionably scented corners of medieval history. The local tavern. That's right, we're talking about what getting drunk was actually like for your average medieval human, before happy hour, before health codes, and long before anyone invented the phrase responsible drinking. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of absurd, soothing trip down humanity's worst-smelling alleyways. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. And let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what really happened in a medieval tavern? Was the ale actually safer than water? Or just a different flavor of regret? Did people drink because they were happy? Or because the soup could legally be classified as a biological weapon? Did anyone ever actually finish a night in a medieval tavern without a new mysterious rash? And who was the poor soul who invented karaoke night using only a lute and a handful of wet onions? Would you survive a medieval bender with your dignity and your teeth intact? Or would you become yet another anonymous legend known only as that one guy who tried to dance on the trestle table and didn't make it? Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1383, inside the Boar and Turnip, the most notorious tavern in the village, with a suspicious puddle in every corner and a hangover in every mug. Welcome to the night out you definitely didn't ask for. You push open the tavern door, hoping the sticky floorboards will at least keep your shoes on. The air hits you like a stew of old ale, wood smoke, and crushed dreams. Locals look up, silently ranking you on the "how much can I fleece from this stranger" scale. You haven't even ordered a drink yet, but congratulations, you've already spent half your dignity at the door. Stepping further inside, you become aware that every pair of eyes in the room has already given you a full credit check, personality test, and frankly, a sniff test. Do you smell like soap? Outsider. Do you have both shoes and all your teeth? Suspicious. The regulars eye you, the way sharks might examine a new swimmer, hungrily, but also a bit bored. There's an unspoken rule here. Don't look too rich, don't look too poor, and whatever you do, don't make eye contact with anyone sharpening a knife on the edge of the bar. The first obstacle is the infamous threshold tax. That's not a real tax, of course. This is medieval England, not modern airport security, but you'll pay it anyway. It starts with a bony kid who materializes at your side, offering to watch your horse. You don't have a horse, but he's already eyeing your shoes as plan B. In the far corner, a bearded man with a nose like a weathered turnip waves you over, introducing himself as Honest Rob, which, by medieval standards, means he's stolen slightly less than average this week. You do your best to blend in. Your options are limited. Stand too tall, and you'll be mistaken for a bailiff or tax collector, and your evening will end with soup in your lap. Hunch too low, and you're pegged as a thief or a runaway monk, both of which come with their own unique set of hazards, including but not limited to being tossed out by your ears. Your best bet is to master the medieval shuffle. 1 part confidence, 2 parts humility, a dash of "please don't notice, I have 3 coins in my pocket." Your clothing is your armor. If you came in with a cloak that doesn't look like it was last washed during the Black Death, congratulations, you're overdressed. Lose the hat if you want to keep it. Tuck in anything shiny, belt buckles, rings, the mysterious hope you had for a pleasant evening. And if anyone asks where you're from, you say, "Oh, just up the road." There is always an up the road, and nobody ever wants more detail. Navigating to an open table is like crossing a field of rickety bridges, except every bridge is made of old drunks, overturned stools, and at least one person who seems to be napping inside a barrel. Step carefully. Don't trip over the dog. Don't step in the puddle, any of them. If someone elbows you in the ribs, that's just the tavern's version of welcome. If someone smiles at you, check your pockets. You finally find a rickety bench in the shadow of the hearth. It's already occupied by a man with 1 eyebrow and half a beard. but he scoots over just enough for you to squeeze in. This, in medieval terms, is a warm greeting. You sit, keeping one hand on your coin pouch and the other on your mug, even though you haven't been served yet. Now, the real initiation begins. Making your order without sounding like you've never been in a tavern before. Don't ask for a menu. Don't ask for anything off the list. Just nod, grunt, and hope for the best. The locals resume their conversations, returning you to the status of background furniture. You're no longer the entertainment. You're just another soul seeking solace in a wooden mug. Take a moment. Breathe in the wood smoke and the sheer, overwhelming humanity. Surviving the entrance is a feat. You've made it. You're in. Sure, you're not sure you'll leave with everything you came with, but for now, you're part of the tapestry. Another thread in the weird, wonderful, slightly dangerous fabric of medieval tavern life. And if you keep your head down, you just might get out of here with both your dignity and your shoes intact. Forget water. Water is for fools and people who like their intestines to do somersaults. Tonight, it's ale or nothing, served in a wooden mug that may have last been washed during the reign of Charlemagne. The beer is cloudy, the ale is warm, and you're pretty sure you just swallowed something that winked at you. Let's set the stage. It's late evening in the Boar and Turnip, and the choice before you is simple: drink what everyone else is drinking, or gamble with your life expectancy. In medieval times, water was technically available, but only in the way a thunderstorm is technically a shower. People drank it if they absolutely had to, or if they had a death wish, or if they were under 5 years old and hadn't yet learned about consequences. The local well has been contaminated since last spring. The stream out back is also the local waste management system. And rumor has it even the ducks won't swim in it anymore. So, ale and beer aren't just fun, they're survival. The mild alcohol, the boiling during brewing, and the magical process known as please, God. Let this not kill me means you have a fighting chance of living until breakfast. And don't get picky about the color, the clarity, or the little floaty bits. In fact, if your drink is clear, you've either been blessed by a saint or you've just been handed dishwater. Most medieval beer is so murky you could lose a ring in it and never see it again. People have. Some say there's still a Lord's signet down at the bottom of the best barrel. You bring the mug to your lips. The rim is rough, not quite splintery, but close enough to keep you humble. The first sip is an adventure in fermentation. The flavor is complicated. Notes of grain, a little sourness, a faint hint of whatever herbs or old boots happened to be lying around the tavern when the batch was brewed. The aftertaste hits like a warm, damp handshake from someone who's been holding onions all day. And then there's the temperature. Forget cold pints with beading condensation. Medieval ale is cellar warm or hearth adjacent at best. It's served lukewarm because there's no such thing as refrigeration unless you put it outside and hope it doesn't freeze solid. The upside? No brain freeze. The downside? Every sip is a gentle reminder that you're living in an age before basic science and ice cubes. Let's talk strength. Medieval ale is not modern craft beer. It's weak. On purpose. Most peasants can drink it all day without falling over, which is good because they do. It's called small beer, and even the children drink it. Yes, you heard that right, children. At breakfast, before their chores. It keeps them hydrated, keeps the bugs at bay, and honestly, keeps everyone just tipsy enough to tolerate medieval dentistry. But every tavern has its own special reserve. This is the beer they keep in a barrel under the bar, only brought out for special occasions or to impress outsiders. The taste is stronger, the color is even more mysterious, and the after effects are legendary. People say the house special once made a bishop sing and a knight cry at the same time. If you're feeling brave, you might ask for a taste. The barkeep gives you a look that says, Are you sure you want to remember tonight? The regulars watch closely. You take a gulp. Instantly, your eyebrows try to escape your face. You're not sure if you've just drunk ale, liquor, or a minor potion. Your stomach does a cautious calculation and decides not to revolt yet. This, more than anything, is the true taste of medieval social life. Drinking ale is less about savoring and more about surviving. You drink not because you want to forget, but because remembering is honestly more dangerous. And as the evening rolls on and your mug is refilled, you begin to appreciate what generations of ancestors knew. In the medieval tavern, beer isn't just a beverage, it's a miracle you're still upright. Drink up, and hope you don't meet whatever was winking at you in the bottom of the cup when you close your eyes tonight. The barmaid gives you two options, thick or thin. Thin means the ale was watered down. Thick means someone dropped a turnip in it and called it flavor. You look at the chalkboard menu. Everything is spelled wrong, and half the options are just crossed out with a stain. This is the first lesson of medieval tavern culture. There's no such thing as a craft cocktail or a curated wine list. If you ask for something on tap, the barmaid might hand you an actual wooden tap and expect you to fix the barrel. The menu is more of a list of regrets than a list of choices. There's ale, thine, ale, thick, cider, questionable, and a mysterious item simply called Owen's Brew, with a warning next to it that looks suspiciously like a crude drawing of a skull. You're tempted to ask for details, but this is medieval customer service at its most medieval. The barmaid's expression suggests questions will be answered with a sharp look, or, if you're lucky, only mild sarcasm. Still, curiosity is a dangerous thing, so you settle for the most neutral-sounding choice, which is to say, you just grunt and point. Thick ale arrives in a mug, heavy enough to be a murder weapon. It sloshes with the consistency of porridge and the color of despair. Thin ale is not much better, pale, frothy, and somehow both watery and sticky. If you hold it up to the fire, you'll see things floating in it. Don't look too closely. No one else does. If you're hoping for variety, don't. The only way to get a different flavor is if a rat fell in the vat last week, and even then, the regulars would describe it as earthy. The menu isn't really about choice, it's about subtle negotiation. Everything here is designed to lower your standards to just above. I hope this doesn't kill me. For the connoisseur, meaning the person with the least self-preservation instinct, there's always the house special. This is what happens when leftovers from every other drink are poured into a barrel, left to ferment, and only served to outsiders or those who lose a bet. The house special is usually described as an experience. It's rumored to have medicinal properties, which in medieval terms means it's strong enough to knock you out for a full night. A few brave souls sometimes ask for wine, hoping for a taste of sophistication. What arrives is a liquid so sour it could strip the enamel off your teeth. Imported wines are for the nobility. What you get is local, homemade, and not so much wine as a bunch of grapes that gave up. Cider is slightly safer, but safer just means you'll remember your name tomorrow. As you scan the room, you notice that every regular has their usual. Some prefer thick, others thin, and a few are working their way down the board, bravely ignoring the warnings and the smell. Ordering something new is a rookie mistake. The smart move is to copy whatever the person with the most teeth is drinking. The barmaid, having delivered your drink, expects payment now, not later. Medieval credit is non-existent. You pay with coins, eggs, or the medieval classic, a vague promise to help repair the fence in spring. Don't bother arguing over the price. The chalkboard says one thing, but the going rate is whatever the barmaid says it is, plus a smile, minus your dignity. Finally, you sit, mug in hand, wondering what you just purchased. Was it thick or thin? Does it even matter? Around you, the locals drink with gusto. savoring each gulp as if it might be their last, because, in a way, it might be. And as you take your first brave sip, you realize you've just passed the ultimate medieval test. You ordered from the menu, survived the interaction, and still have most of your teeth. Congratulations, you're officially part of the crowd. And maybe, just maybe, you'll live to regret it. You raise the mug. The first gulp is a combination of malt, barnyard, and what might be hope. It's warm, it's tangy, it's a little chewy. The aftertaste lingers like regret at your high school reunion. This is not the crisp, refreshing lager you might order at your local brewery in the 21st century. This is the medieval peasant's reality, a beverage that doesn't just remind you of the earth, it practically is the earth, with hints of last week's harvest and whatever fell in the vat and didn't swim out. The first shock is texture. If you were expecting a liquid, surprise, this is more like soup's slightly alcoholic cousin. You're chewing, just a little. There's something hearty about it, as if the brewer couldn't decide whether to make bread or beer and simply split the difference. The flavor profile is complex in all the wrong ways. There's the unmistakable taste of malted barley, bold, a little sour, and very persistent. It's quickly joined by something that might be turnip, or possibly just bad luck. Hops? If you're lucky, you might detect a faint bitterness. But hops are expensive and used sparingly, so most of the bitterness comes from the questionable hygiene of the brewing process. If your ale tastes clean, the tavern owner is either a genius or a liar. As you swallow, a cloud of farmyard aroma rises to meet you. Picture a hay bale, but with dreams and aspirations. It's a rustic bouquet, earthy, grassy, slightly tangy, with undertones of goat and a vague sense that someone should really clean the stables. It's a sensory experience that transports you directly to the barn, bypassing all the niceties of modern sanitation. The warmth isn't comforting, it's functional. Medieval ale is served at room temperature, which means it's the same temperature as the sheep huddled near the hearth. No refrigeration means every sip is just a little above tepid, occasionally flirting with cooked oatmeal territory. The warmth does help you forget about the outside world, but it also makes you suspicious of the floating bits, which now seem to be moving independently. As the mug lowers from your lips, you're left with a peculiar coating on your tongue, a combination of grain husk, wooden cup, and mystery ingredient. The finish is long, very long. It's like that one story your uncle tells every Thanksgiving. You want it to end, but you know it won't. The aftertaste follows you around, making sure you never forget where you are and what choices led you here. Glancing around, you notice no one else reacts to the flavor. The regulars sip stoically, their faces unmoved, their eyes betraying no emotion except perhaps, "This is fine, I guess." A few even seem to relish it, chasing the mug's contents with a satisfied sigh, as if daring the ale to try something new. It's possible after years of drinking this stuff, your taste buds simply sign a non-disclosure agreement and stop reporting new information. For the uninitiated, meaning you, there's a moment of doubt. Do you take another sip? You do, because that's the only liquid on offer. And as you do, you begin to acclimate. Is it possible you're starting to enjoy it? Or is this just survival instinct? The human palate is resilient, and after the second or third swallow, you find yourself searching for good notes. Was that a hint of apple? Maybe. Or maybe you just bit into a wayward piece of last autumn's cider mash. You set the mug down, lips tingling, tongue slightly numb, and realize you've just become part of the tradition. This is how medieval people made it through winter, through famine, through the endless repetition of days, one chewy, barnyard-flavored sip at a time. The taste may not be memorable for the right reasons, but it's impossible to forget. And in a world where comfort is a fantasy, sometimes the best you can do is drink, laugh, and let the aftertaste linger until the next round. Inside the tavern, the noise is relentless. laughter, shouts, a baby wailing somewhere, and the slap of a lute played by a guy with only 3 fingers. The air is thick with smoke and stories nobody asked for. The floor is so sticky, it probably has its own taxonomy. It's a kind of chaos that modern bars can only dream of. An honest, unfiltered wall of humanity pressed into a room barely large enough for the crowd it's holding. Conversation doesn't just echo. It reverberates through beams that have heard 100 years of secrets and at least twice as many bad jokes. Somewhere near the door, a group of farmers are arm wrestling over a bet involving a turnip and a chicken. Nobody's entirely sure what the stakes are, but everyone's invested. At the center of the room, a dog barks at shadows, convinced he's part of the entertainment. He probably is. Babies are here because medieval childcare is just bring the kid and hope it doesn't eat anything fatal. The baby is wailing at full volume, but in the collective tavern soundscape, it's just another instrument in the orchestra. Above the din, a group in the corner attempts to harmonize on a drinking song, missing every note but nailing the volume. The smoke is an ever-present character. Wood smoke from the hearth, pipe smoke curling from several bearded faces, and the distinct scent of something herbal that definitely isn't sage. Visibility is optional. If you lose your mug, don't worry. The fog will help you find it again by tripping over it later. The candles provide just enough light to make the shadows look menacing and the stains on the walls look like ancient cave art. Every patch of soot tells a story. Most of them involve spilled ale and questionable decisions. Your shoes, should you be lucky enough to have any, stick to the floor with every step. The surface below is a mosaic of centuries of spilled drinks, old food, muddy boots, and, possibly, natural history. Something crunches underfoot, and you're not entirely sure it's not alive. The locals don't notice. They've achieved a zen-like state of acceptance, navigating the tavern's sticky terrain with the practiced grace of people who have no other choice. Tables are mismatched, each one bowed in the middle from years of supporting elbows, tankards, and the occasional collapsed peasant. Benches wobble, chairs tilt, and if you find a seat that doesn't immediately threaten to throw you to the ground, count yourself among the elite. The walls are adorned with the medieval equivalent of decor. An assortment of antlers, faded tapestries, and, inexplicably, a pair of boots nailed above the fireplace. Nobody remembers why they're there, but tradition is tradition. The laughter is the glue that holds it all together. Someone's always telling a story, louder, longer, and more inaccurate with each retelling. Gossip travels faster than the plague. Secrets don't exist for long. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone knows everyone's business. If you manage to keep a secret in this room, you might qualify for sainthood. Amidst the chaos, there's warmth, physical and otherwise. The hearth glows, the ale flows, and, for a brief moment, the world outside disappears. Winter storms, failing crops, even the latest round of village taxes, all forgotten within these walls. For a few hours, everyone is equal. The rich man's coat just as grimy as the poor man's, the laughter just as loud, the ale just as questionable. So you sit back, listening to the endless rise and fall of noise, feeling the sticky embrace of the floorboards and the sweet sting of wood smoke in your eyes. This is what passes for nightlife in the Middle Ages. Raucous, unruly, deeply unglamorous, and, if you let it, a kind of joy. The stains on the walls are permanent, but so are the memories. And if you leave with only a headache and a faint smell of goat, you're doing better than most. Every table is a battleground for dice, knuckle bones, or something called blind pig. The rules are unclear, the stakes are low, and the risk of personal injury is alarmingly high. Someone offers to arm wrestle you for your shoes. Welcome to medieval tavern entertainment, where the motto is it's all fun and games until someone loses a finger, and even then, it's still pretty fun. Gambling is everywhere. The most popular game is a raucous, half-shouted dice match using actual sheep knuckle bones. The sound is familiar. A sharp rattle, groans, and the universal exclamation of someone realizing they've just lost this week's bread money to a man named Big Anselm, who claims the dice are blessed by Saint Cuthbert but definitely look like they've spent time up his sleeve. Next up is a drinking contest involving 3 cups and a lot of suspicious swapping. The goal is simple. Don't be the first to fall under the table. Rules are loose, scoring is arbitrary, and cheating is considered a medieval art form. If you complain, the answer is always the same. That's how we play in this village. No 2 villages play the same game the same way, which is great for keeping travelers permanently confused and slightly poorer. Some tables are deeply invested in a game of 9 men's Morris, using pebbles and a board scratched into the wood with a dull knife. Arguments break out about the rules. No one actually knows them, but everyone insists their version is the only correct one. Occasionally, the barkeep must intervene to prevent a full-scale brawl over whether diagonal moves are allowed. But the real spectacle is physical. Wrestling matches erupt between friends and strangers, fueled by ale, bravado, and the kind of peer pressure that only exists when you're surrounded by people who remember when you cried about your pet goose in 3rd grade. There's no ring, no referee, and no padding, just 2 people squaring off in the middle of the sticky floor, watched by a crowd whose support wavers with every spilled drink. The winner claims a small purse, or, more commonly, the loser's hat, dignity, or in one memorable case, their best turnip. Blind Pig is the tavern favorite, an improvised game where someone is blindfolded, spun around, and then attempts to tag another player while everyone else does their best to trip, distract, or otherwise sabotage the poor soul. The game is pure medieval chaos. Last week, a pig was actually involved. No one has seen it since. And then there's arm wrestling. The challenge comes suddenly, and you can't refuse. It's a matter of tavern honor. The opponent might be a burly farmer, a wiry old woman with forearms like tree roots, or a barmaid who has seen more fights than you've had hot meals. The stakes? Shoes, a future drink, or sometimes just pride. Winning means you get to keep your footwear. Losing means you limp home in the mud, your toes immediately regretting all your life choices. Sometimes the games get philosophical. Who can tell the biggest lie is a classic. Contestants take turns spinning outrageous yarns about wrestling wolves, finding gold in the churchyard, or being kissed by the local lord's daughter. The only prize is laughter and maybe a free drink if you can keep a straight face while claiming you once beat a knight at chess using only your elbows. Injuries are so common they're practically a feature. Bruised knuckles, sprained wrists, the odd chipped tooth. These are the souvenirs of a night well spent. The local healer, if there is one, refuses to treat tavern wounds on principle. Everyone knows the risk, and everyone plays anyway. Because what else are you going to do in a world without Netflix? So as you watch the chaos unfold, or maybe get roped into a match yourself, you realize that these games are more than just distractions. They're community. A place where even losing is winning, and where the only thing riskier than the house ale is the next round of Blind Pig. Good luck, and guard your shoes. Meet the regulars. There's old Gervais, who's rumoured to have survived 6 plagues, and Big Anselm, who eats soup with his hands. Nobody knows what the guy in the corner does for a living, but everyone agrees not to ask. Every tavern has its cast of characters, and in the boar and turnip, they're the reason the floor isn't the only thing that's sticky with history. Old Gervais sits near the fire every night, wrapped in a cloak that smells like wet wool and secrets. His beard contains enough breadcrumbs to feed a small flock, and his tales get longer and less believable with every mug. He swears he once outran a pack of wolves, and also that he's allergic to daylight, priests, and anything that isn't ale. Strangely, nobody's ever seen him get sick. Not even when the Black Death rolled through like a medieval Monday. Big Anselm, on the other hand, occupies more bench than anyone human reasonably should. He's a legend for 2 things. arm wrestling, and his unique approach to table manners, which is to say, none at all. He dunks entire hunks of bread into his soup and then slurps the result straight from his enormous, shovel-like hands. If you see him with a spoon, it's only because he's repurposing it as a doorstop. Children are both fascinated and terrified by him, mostly because he tells bedtime stories about vegetables coming to life and seeking revenge. Then there's the man in the corner. He always arrives just after sunset and always picks the same seat, as if the tavern were a chessboard and he's planning a quiet checkmate. His clothes are plain, his boots are muddy, and his eyes flick from the shadows to the door and back. Some say he's an ex-soldier, others think he's a smuggler, a wizard, or maybe just someone who once failed spectacularly at being a monk. He never joins the games, but he's seen every brawl, every spilled secret, every triumphant return and shameful stumble home. If you catch his eye, he nods, barely. If you ask what he does for a living, the whole room gets quieter than a church on Monday morning. Of course, there's Marjorie, the barmaid and unofficial queen of the establishment. She knows every regular's preferred drink, every unpaid tab, and every embarrassing story you'd rather forget. Marjorie is both judge and jury. She'll lend you an ear if you're in trouble, or a thwack with the ladle if you get out of hand. People say she once chased a would-be thief clear into the next village, using only a loaf of stale bread and pure, unfiltered rage. Don't forget Tilda, the goat lady. She brings a new goat into the tavern every week, claims it's for company, and insists it brings good luck. She'll buy a round of drinks if her goat sneezes before sundown. Some weeks, the entire tavern toasts to the health of livestock and nobody bats an eye. There's also the young dreamer, Jankin, who talks about moving to the city, finding his fortune, maybe inventing something that isn't just a better way to churn butter. He's the local philosopher, always scribbling ideas onto scraps of parchment or the back of his own hand. The regulars humour him. Sometimes they even listen, if only to make fun of him after his latest plan inevitably involves less mud and more shoes. Each of these regulars brings their own legend, their own quirks, and their own history to the nightly gathering. They're as much a part of the tavern as the warped timbers and the sticky floorboards. Their laughter and arguments fill the air, their rituals give the night its rhythm, and their presence reassures you that, no matter how strange things get, you're never the oddest one in the room. So you settle in, raise your mug, and soak it all in. The regulars might seem odd, but they're the glue that holds this place together. And after a few more drinks, you realize you're slowly becoming one of them. Another story. Another face in the candlelight. Another legend in the making. It's time for food, if you can call it that. Communal trenchers are passed around with more fingers than spoons. You try not to think about who used the spoon last, or if that's actually bread or a very tired potato. Eating in a medieval tavern is a full-contact sport. Equal parts hunger, negotiation, and blind faith. Trenchers, which are basically thick slabs of stale bread doubling as plates, are plopped down in the center of the table. They soak up everything: broth, ale, sweat, and existential dread. By the end of the night, they're more like edible napkins than anything else. When you see someone gnawing on a used trencher, you realize you've reached a level of don't ask, don't tell you never imagined outside of family holiday dinners. The main course arrives in a single pot, its contents somewhere between stew, porridge, and social experiment. The color is mostly brown, occasionally interrupted by something green and nervous-looking. Everyone digs in with whatever they have: knives, fingers, chunks of bread, the occasional borrowed spoon. The communal spoon makes its way around the table like a sacred relic. It's wooden, deeply stained, and slightly warped from years of being both a utensil and, rumor has it, a makeshift lockpick. During a particularly boring winter, you're invited to take your turn. As you lift the spoon, you notice it's still damp from the last person's efforts. It has the texture of driftwood and the aroma of lived experience. In this world, clean means recently licked. You try to ignore the faint tooth marks along the handle, and hope you're just imagining the wiggling. There's etiquette to communal eating, but most of it boils down to don't cough directly in the pot and try to aim for the solid bits. If you want a second helping, the rules are simple. Be quick, be bold, and don't hesitate. Hesitation means someone else, probably Big Anselm, will spear the best chunk of turnip right out from under your nose. Sharing food is a communal act, but it's also a contest of speed, hand-eye coordination, and, sometimes, intimidation. If you drop anything, don't worry. The dog will take care of it before you even have time to look guilty. Napkins don't exist. Sleeves, however, are considered multifunctional, wiping hands, faces, occasionally benches. The tablecloth, if you see one, is more for decoration than hygiene. It's been passed down through generations and now has a personality of its own. If you're particularly unlucky, you'll discover that the tablecloth is just a repurposed cloak with suspicious stains and a faint smell of onions. Mealtime conversation is lively, partly to distract from what's on the menu. Gossip flows as freely as the ale, who's marrying whom, which neighbour's cow gave the weirdest milk, and whether the Lord's tax collector really does have a tail. Laughter erupts at regular intervals, especially when someone gets a surprise bite, like a pebble hidden in the barley or an unidentifiable gristle nugget. Complaining about the food is pointless. The only seasoning is salt, and that's rationed with all the care of a royal dowry. There's an art to pretending you're full before you actually are. Pushing food around on your trencher, strategically offering seconds to your neighbours, or loudly toasting someone's good health are all ways to mask the fact that you're not quite sure if dinner was supposed to be crunchy. At the end, if you're truly desperate, you can gnaw on the trencher itself, now soggy and strangely filling, a sort of medieval power bar. After the plates are cleared, usually by the family dog or an eager goat, the barmaid reclaims the communal spoon and wipes it off on her apron, ready for the next round. You sit back, surviving yet another meal, stomach only slightly unsettled, wondering what's next. Congratulations. You've just participated in the great medieval tradition of not asking too many questions about dinner, and, somehow, you're still alive. Snacks are free, if you're brave. The options include salted fish, questionable sausages, and something that looks like a lizard, but claims to be chicken. You dip it in mustard, because at least mustard kills everything, including hope. Bar snacks are a tradition as old as taverns themselves. And here in the boar and turnip, they're served with all the fanfare of a dare. A chipped wooden platter lands in front of you, bearing a selection that manages to look both overcooked and dangerously undercooked at the same time. There are tiny dried fish that seem to stare back at you, their little eyes like warnings from the afterlife. The smell is equal parts ocean and basement, with a hint of smoke that might have been accidental. Next, you examine the sausages, if you can call them that. Each one is slightly a different shade of grey, ranging from overcast morning to old parchment. The casing is tough, the filling is mysterious, and the best you can hope for is that it was once attached to something with legs. No one ever asks what's inside a medieval sausage. It's not so much a meat product as a sort of edible riddle wrapped in animal intestine and bravado. You spot a little green fleck and hope it's a herb, not something with a heartbeat. Then there's the house special. Chicken on a stick. It's thin, crispy, and vaguely reptilian. The barmaid swears it's poultry, but the local rumour mill suggests it might be the tavern's solution to a recent rat problem. You chew thoughtfully, trying not to imagine tiny claws. The texture is somewhere between grilled shoe and surprise. But you keep eating because that's what everyone else is doing. The communal jar of mustard sits in the centre, sharp, nose-clearing, and so strong it could double as a disinfectant. You slather your snack in yellow, feeling both protected and slightly nervous. Salt is the primary seasoning, and it's used with reckless abandon. Medieval cooks learned early that salt covers a multitude of sins, including spoilage. Everything else is more or less optional. If you're lucky, you might find a pickled onion or a wedge of cheese so hard it could be used in self-defense. You gnaw on it anyway. Chewing, you realize, is a theme here. Nothing is soft, nothing is subtle, and everything could double as a weapon in a pinch. The locals have their favorites. Old Gervais swears by the fish, claiming it keeps the humours balanced and wards off witches. Big Anselm, naturally, devours sausage after sausage, only pausing to warn you that the crunchy bits are good luck. The man in the corner peels tiny bones from his chicken on a stick with surgical precision, never speaking, never making eye contact with the food. There's a certain camaraderie in the risk. Everyone knows what's at stake, and part of the fun is pretending you don't. Laughter erupts as a newcomer bites into a particularly chewy bit and tries not to make a face. Someone else offers a toast to mystery meat. May it never be identified. It's a social contract. We all eat, nobody asks, and any complaints are handled by the barmaid with a look that could curdle cream. Occasionally, you find something genuinely tasty. A roasted chestnut, maybe, or a dried apple that's only slightly too chewy. These are small victories, celebrated with another swig of ale and a silent prayer. Even the goat gets in on the action, hovering hopefully for dropped snacks and bits of rind. In the end, you finish your plate, feeling both braver and slightly less confident in your digestive system. Medieval bar snacks are less about nourishment and more about participation, a nightly trial by fire for your taste buds and your courage. You survived another round, and in the boar and turnip, that's all anyone can really ask, and who knows, maybe you actually like the mustard. Stranger things have happened here. Hand washing is a rumor, and napkins are whatever sleeve you happen to be wearing. The table is wiped with a rag that, in a better world, would have been burned for public safety. The smell is authentic, which is a polite way of saying aggressive. Welcome to the medieval tavern, where personal hygiene is an optional side quest that most patrons have failed. Your first clue is the communal basin by the door, filled with cloudy water and a bar of soap that looks more like a fossilized potato. Nobody actually uses it, except occasionally to rinse out a mug or dunk a particularly sticky child. Hand washing is viewed with suspicion, as if it's something only a fussy noble or a foreigner would insist on. If you're seen scrubbing your fingers before a meal, expect a few raised eyebrows and at least one joke about fancy city folk. The reality is, in an age before germ theory, people didn't connect illness to dirty hands. They blamed bad air, angry spirits, or the fact that you once ate cheese on a Friday. The average tavern-goer's hygiene regimen is minimal. Splash some cold water on your face once a week. Maybe comb the visible part of your hair. And, if you're truly ambitious, pick the larger pieces of dinner out of your beard. As for your hands, they're just as likely to be used as a fork, a napkin, and a towel, all at the same time. Cutlery is more of a suggestion than a rule. Spoons are communal, and, as previously discussed, a roll of the dice. Knives are personal, but most people keep theirs tucked into a belt and only produce it for real emergencies, like a particularly stubborn sausage or an argument over the last piece of bread. Forks exist, but they're rare and usually met with suspicion. The average diner just stabs, scoops, or pinches their way through the meal, then wipes their hands down their tunic with the confidence of someone who'll be wearing the same tunic for another week. The barmaid makes a valiant attempt to keep things clean, but her weapons are limited. The house rag is a tattered square of old linen, now mostly grey, that serves as tablecloth, mop, and, on especially busy nights, a substitute bandage. She'll swipe the table in a single heroic gesture, pushing crumbs, grease, and whatever else straight onto the floor, where it becomes the dog's problem. There's a sort of logic to it. Why bother cleaning the surface when everyone's just going to get it dirty again in 5 minutes? The scent of the place is best described as medieval musk. It's a robust blend of wood smoke, spilled ale, wet wool, human effort, and the vague tang of livestock. The regulars hardly notice anymore, but newcomers sometimes blink back tears or develop a sudden fascination with breathing through their mouth. If someone lights incense, it's either to cover up a truly impressive spill or because someone lost a bet. Your clothes, of course, double as napkins. There's no shame in wiping your hands on your sleeve. Everyone does it. The cumulative effect is a sleeve stiff enough to stand on its own by the end of the week. The bravest will sometimes rinse their clothes in a stream. But drying them is another adventure, often resulting in a garment that smells faintly of damp goat. Personal boundaries are more of a modern invention. The concept of personal space hasn't caught on. You're pressed elbow to elbow with strangers, all sharing germs, stories, and the occasional cough. Lice are inevitable. Fleas are probable. If you leave the tavern with the same number of parasites you arrived with, you're winning. So you sit, surrounded by a haze of authentic smells and sounds, hands only marginally cleaner than when you started, feeling oddly content. After all, you're part of the tribe now. A little dirtier, maybe, but also a little less worried. In a world where comfort is scarce and soap is a rumor, you learn to celebrate survival, one sticky, communal, questionably cleaned night at a time. Someone starts a song. Everyone joins in, even though nobody knows the words. The lute player is only slightly in tune, but enthusiasm counts for more than skill. You're encouraged to sing along, or else. This is medieval karaoke, centuries before electricity and shame. There's no stage, no flashing lights, and definitely no power ballads. Instead, the nearest thing to a sound system is the hollowed-out barrel the lute player sits on, and the crowd's idea of a playlist is whatever pops into old Gervais's head. Most songs begin without warning. A mug slams the table, a voice bellows the first few notes, and within seconds, the tavern transforms into a choir of the untrained, the unwilling, and the tone-deaf. The lute guy, known simply as Will, plays every night, rain or shine, 3 fingers, and a grim sense of duty. His lute is missing a string, possibly 2, but nobody complains, mainly because Will's glare can curdle milk, and he's rumored to have once bitten a rat in half for making fun of his playing. His technique is creative. He alternates between strumming, plucking, and occasionally just slapping the instrument when it refuses to cooperate. But the real star isn't the lute, it's the crowd. Everyone is expected to participate. This isn't the polite, self-conscious sing-along of the modern era. Here, the volume is more important than the melody, and the lyrics are almost always improvised. The local favorite is a tune called Down by the Broken Fence, which seems to be about a fence, a sheep, and possibly lost love, but changes depending on who's leading. If you're new, you'll be given the chorus to sing, loudly and repeatedly, no matter how badly you mangle it. Other classics include 3 turnips in a sack, not nearly as romantic as it sounds, Ale for the Ploughman, and the infamous Who Took the Lord's Pig, a song with more verses than sense. At some point, the crowd will erupt into a round where each table tries to out-sing the others. It's less harmony, more friendly yelling, and it quickly devolves into competitive toasting. Someone always claims to remember all the original words, but by the 3rd mug of ale, even old Gervais is making it up as he goes. Clapping is encouraged. So is stomping, banging on the table, and producing strange percussive sounds with whatever is at hand, spoons, mugs, or the heel of your boot. The acoustics are, predictably, terrible, but the mood is infectious. Even the shyest newcomer is swept up in the ritual, handed a mug and expected to sing or drink or both. For a few chaotic minutes, everyone is a performer, and dignity is strictly optional. If someone tries a solo, the tavern falls into a hush, partly out of respect, partly because it's always a gamble. The bravest souls launch into ballads about lost battles, heroic chickens, or romantic misadventures behind the blacksmith's shed. The only requirement is commitment. If your voice cracks, just sing louder. If you forget the words, invent new ones about your neighbor's questionable haircut. The songs serve a purpose. They bind the room together, bridging the gaps between stranger and regular, peasant and miller, sober and not so sober. Laughter is the glue, embarrassment is fleeting, and stories are born in every off-key verse. If you survive your first night's performance, you'll be remembered not by name, but as the one who sang about the leaky roof and accidentally rhymed it with horse's tooth. As the night winds down, the singing softens, replaced by the hum of satisfied voices and the gentle twang of Will, tuning his lute for tomorrow. Your throat aches, your ears ring, and your cheeks hurt from laughing, but you're filled with a warmth no ale can match. The sense of belonging that only comes from singing nonsense with strangers in a smoky medieval tavern. In this moment, you're not just part of the audience, you're part of the legend. You're paying with pennies, buttons, or the promise of a favor in the spring. The barkeep keeps a tab, but everyone knows it's just a list of who to avoid when collecting debts. The medieval tavern is a masterclass in alternative finance. No one here is handing over a credit card, and the closest thing to contactless payment is tossing a coin into the barkeep's apron and hoping it doesn't bounce out. Currency comes in all shapes and sizes. Bent coppers, foreign coins with questionable monarchs stamped on them, and the occasional chunk of silver that's probably been whittled down during every slow night since the last harvest. But money is only part of the story. If you're short on coin, and let's be honest, everyone is, barter is king. You might offer up a handful of beans, a strip of dried meat, or a suspiciously dented pewter cup. Someone once paid for 3 rounds with a sack of onions, and the promise to mend the barkeep's fence come spring. The only thing less reliable than medieval currency is medieval promises. But that doesn't stop anyone from trying. Tabs are written in chalk behind the bar, an honor system built entirely on optimism. Every regular owes something. Old Gervais is 3 mugs in debt, payable when his gout clears up, which is medieval for never. Big Anselm swears he'll settle up after the next good harvest. And the man in the corner simply stares when asked, daring anyone to press the issue. If you're new and try to pay up front, you might get a suspicious look. Real patrons run a tab, then spend months inventing creative excuses. The value of a drink is also up for interpretation. Prices change by the day, the weather, and the mood of the barmaid. The cost of a mug of thick ale, 2 pennies, or 1 if you can tell a joke I haven't heard. Thin ale might be half a penny, unless you look thirsty, in which case, it's double. If you're really strapped, you can always pledge a future favor. Chop wood, haul water, or promise to stand lookout for the tax collector next time he comes sniffing around. Counterfeiting is alive and well. Some patrons shave coins to make them lighter. Others try their luck with foreign coppers. The barkeep is wise to every trick and will bite a coin in half to test its worth, usually leaving a permanent tooth mark as a warning. Buttons sometimes pass as change, and the occasional unlucky soul is forced to part with their last shoelace in exchange for just 1 more round. Sometimes, the economics of the tavern get even more creative. A particularly skilled patron might barter a song, a dance, or a story for their next drink. This is how the tavern acquired its resident lute player, who claims he's been playing off his tab since the last plague. If you're charming, you can flirt your way into an extra cup. If you're bold, you can gamble for it, though winning is rare and losing means you're probably on dish duty for the rest of the night. The local economy is less about cold, hard cash, and more about relationships, reputation, and sometimes sheer bravado. Everyone keeps track of who owes what, but debts are as flexible as the tavern's definition of fresh. Settle up too often, and you're seen as uptight. Never pay, and you'll eventually find your mug accidentally filled with dishwater. By the end of the night, the ledger behind the bar is more a work of historical fiction than accounting. But nobody seems to mind. In the medieval tavern, getting drunk is as much about being part of the chaos as it is about the drink itself. So you laugh, you promise to pay later, and you join a community where the true currency is trust. And the only real investment is a good story to distract the barkeep when the tab comes due. A dance breaks out. It's less dancing with the stars and more avoiding broken bones. Someone falls into the fire, and everyone agrees that's the highlight of the night. In a medieval tavern, dancing isn't an event, it's an inevitability. The ale flows, the lute thrums its uneven rhythm, and before long, someone's boot is stomping a beat against a table leg. A half-tune, half-shout rises above the din, and suddenly half the tavern is up, swaying, spinning, and colliding in what could loosely be described as a group dance, if not a small-scale riot. Tables are instantly repurposed as stages, benches as dance partners, and the floor itself becomes a shifting obstacle course of spilled ale, discarded sausage, and one anxious dog. There are no real steps to follow, unless jump up and down, wave your arms, and hope you don't slip on a turnip counts as choreography. People join in regardless of age, agility, or sobriety. Old Gervais leads a line of villagers in a sort of hopping circle, periodically forgetting why he's there, but never missing a beat. Big Anselm, surprisingly nimble for a man of his size, attempts a spin, knocking over 2 chairs, a mug, and nearly a local tax collector. Nobody seems to mind. Accidents are the heart of the entertainment. The music is both relentless and forgiving. Will the lute guy bangs out something energetic, only occasionally pausing to retune or curse at a missing string. Others contribute with hand claps, spoon percussion, or banging on empty tankards. Singing is optional but encouraged, though most lyrics devolve into laughter and shouts of encouragement by the second verse. If you want to join in, you're welcomed, sometimes physically, as a pair of sturdy arms hoist you onto the nearest table. The unwritten rule is no wallflowers. Anyone caught lurking at the edge is quickly swept into the fray, regardless of protest or general coordination. Even the barmaid gets involved, swirling around the crowd while somehow never spilling a drop of ale. At some point, the local dog attempts to participate, barking and weaving between legs, possibly in search of snacks or just a quieter life. Injuries are common, but morale is high. A stubbed toe is met with a cheer. A bruised shin earns you a seat of honor and a refill. Someone slips and lands squarely on the floor, grinning sheepishly as half the room claps and someone else yells, "You're next!" When a young farmer accidentally tumbles backwards into the hearth, thankfully more smoke than flame, the whole tavern roars with laughter, and he's rewarded with a heroic nickname that will haunt him for years, Firefoot. The dance itself becomes a rolling, unpredictable celebration. Couples spin out of nowhere, some genuinely in love, others just swept up in the chaos and proximity. Shoes are lost, hats are traded, and one unlucky soul realizes too late that he's still clutching a half-eaten sausage, now destined to become part of tavern lore. Eventually, the dancing slows as people catch their breath, nurse minor scrapes, and search for lost belongings. The room feels warmer, both from the exertion and the sense of camaraderie. For a few wild minutes, everyone forgets the cold outside, the work waiting at dawn, and the ever-present uncertainty of medieval life. As the last notes of the lute fade and laughter settles into satisfied murmurs, you look around and realize you've just witnessed the purest form of medieval escapism. Dancing on the table isn't just about fun, it's about survival. It's a rebellion against routine, a joyful defiance of aches and worries, and proof that, even in the grimmiest tavern, people will always find a reason to celebrate. If you wake up tomorrow with bruises, a sore throat, and a vague memory of dancing with a goat, take heart. That just means you did it right. Arguments escalate quickly. The tavern owner has a club behind the bar for a reason. The local bailiff is asleep in the corner, so fights are usually settled by whoever is left standing or least flammable. In the medieval tavern, conflict is inevitable. After a few rounds of thick ale, tempers flare and old grudges bubble up with the speed and reliability of a leaky thatched roof in a thunderstorm. It might start as a spirited debate about the outcome of a sheep race, the suspicious smell of the house sausage, or whether last winter's plague was the result of bad turnips or simply divine punishment. Voices rise, mugs slam, and, in an instant, the atmosphere flips from jolly to brace yourself. Brawls are less a disruption and more a nightly ritual. They're woven into the very fabric of tavern life, like spilled ale and questionable songs. The regulars treat fighting as a form of communication. Some even seem to prefer a punch to a handshake. An insult about someone's hat or parentage is enough to kick off a flurry of elbows, spilled drinks, and the occasional well-aimed loaf of bread. The tavern owner, Marjorie, all business and biceps, keeps a weathered club behind the bar, not so much for use as for show. Most people know better than to cross her. If she stands up and cracks her knuckles, the crowd quiets down, arguments fade to muttering, and the club resumes its post as silent enforcer. Marjorie's approach is simple. She doesn't care who started it. She only cares if her tables survive. If you break a chair, you fix it. If you spill ale, you mop it. If you dent her club, you'd better start running. The local bailiff is technically responsible for keeping the peace, but in practice, he's more decoration than deterrent. He occupies the same corner every night, head tilted back, mouth open, dreaming of retirement or maybe just the world's longest nap. Occasionally, he'll rouse himself long enough to wave his staff and grumble about order. But everyone knows the real law in the tavern is whoever's holding the biggest mug, or Marjorie. Fights are rarely fair. Duels break out over spilled drinks, lost games, or disputed love interests. Sometimes, two opponents will agree to take it outside, which means exactly 3 steps out the door before both tumble back in, tangled and covered in mud. The most entertaining are the ones with rules, bare knuckle, first to fall, or, for the more theatrical, who can hold their breath in the stew pot the longest. The outcomes are unpredictable, and nobody keeps score. The only real victory is getting away with your dignity, and at least one shoe. Weapons are technically forbidden, but a quick inventory of the average patron reveals an assortment of knives, belts, and the odd farming implement. Most prefer their fists, though, and the brawls, while chaotic, rarely turn deadly. A punch here, a slap there, a thrown potato for good measure. The worst injury is usually pride, followed by a week's worth of explaining to the spouse why your ear looks like a purple turnip. Once the dust settles and the losers have been mopped up, or occasionally left to nap under a table, life returns to normal. Drinks are refilled, apologies, mostly, exchanged, and old feuds put on pause until the next time someone accuses Big Anselm of cheating at Blind Pig. The tavern's laughter grows louder, as if washing away the memory of every scuffle. Even the bailiff, briefly woken, nods approvingly before resuming his slumber. In the end, the law here is more about survival than justice. You learn to keep your head down, your wits sharp, and your mug full. In the medieval tavern, peace is a group project, and everyone's a participant, whether you're fighting, refereeing, or just dodging the flying sausage. And if you ever do get caught in a brawl, just remember, Marjorie's club is impartial but very, very effective. The songs are about turnips, lost sheep, and the one time someone saw the king. Maybe. The lyrics don't rhyme and nobody cares. If you forget the words, just mumble and slam your mug. Drinking songs are the soundtrack of the medieval tavern, a living, sloshing archive of every heartbreak, harvest, and improbable adventure. Their communal property, remixed every night by whoever's still upright and loud enough to lead. The subject matter is gloriously mundane, There's Ode to the Big Turnip, a haunting ballad about a vegetable that grew so large it blocked the church door for a week. And Where's My Sheep? Equal parts love song and unsolved mystery. There's The Ale Never Ends, which does in fact end, usually mid-verse when someone forgets what comes next and just yells "Oi!" until everyone joins in. The King makes an occasional cameo in songs like Saw the King, Swear on My Life, which is sung with a mixture of awe and total fabrication. The verses shift from table to table. Maybe it was the king, maybe it was just a guy with a shiny hat. No one's bothered by the uncertainty. The point is to fill the room with sound, not historical accuracy. If you're new to the tavern, you quickly learn the etiquette. Participation is mandatory, melody is optional, and volume is always appreciated. The songs are a patchwork of half-remembered tales and inside jokes, shaped by the moods and memories of whoever's singing. If you stumble on the words, just repeat the last line or invent something about a lost turnip, and everyone will cheer as if you've performed a solo at court. The real artistry is in the chorus. Every song, no matter how obscure or meandering, circles back to a simple, easy-to-shout refrain. Something about ale, lost love, or a goat with suspicious intentions. These are the lines that unite the tavern, echoed by all, from the oldest regular to the bashful newcomer. Cups slam the table in unison, benches creak, and the dog howls his own version from under the hearth. The musicians are whoever's available and not currently embroiled in a brawl. Will the lute guy valiantly picks out a tune, the local blacksmith might provide percussion with a pair of tankards, and anyone with 2 spoons and a steady hand is instantly recruited as backup. There are no auditions. Your willingness to join in is all that's required. Occasionally, a barmaid will belt out a solo, pausing only to shush the crowd or fetch another round. Her voice, raw and confident, has the power to hush the room until, inevitably, someone cracks a joke and the chorus crashes in once more. The topics are as local as the ale and just as unpredictable. There's a ballad about the night Big Anselm tried to marry a sheep. Turns out it was just very dark and he'd misplaced his spectacles. And another about the legendary 3-day pie that outlasted a minor famine. Every mishap and minor miracle becomes a verse. If you become tavern famous for any reason, falling into the fire, winning at Blind Pig, surviving Marjorie's Club, expect your own song by next week, with lyrics made up on the spot and a chorus designed for easy mumbling. The beauty of these drinking songs isn't in their craft, but in their chaos. They give everyone a chance to belong, to raise a mug, and to lose themselves for a while in a mess of melody and memory. There are no wrong notes, just louder ones. And as the last refrain trails off into laughter and the glow of the hearth, you realize that, in this room, every sorrow can be sung away, every joy shared, and even a song about turnips can feel like a celebration. So, fill your mug, hum along, and let the night carry you away, off-key, unashamed, and entirely at home. Barmaids run the place with an iron glare. Woe to anyone who grabs, gropes, or gropes too slowly. The toughest person in the tavern is usually the woman pouring your drink. Step into any medieval tavern, and you'll quickly discover that the pecking order starts and ends behind the bar. The barmaid, Marjorie, Edith, or perhaps just call me Mistress if you value your kneecaps, wields her ladle with the authority of a local magistrate and the precision of a battle-hardened general. She moves through the chaos with purpose, carrying 4 brimming mugs in one hand and a 6th sense for trouble in the other. A single raised eyebrow from her is enough to silence even the drunkest regular. In a world where men might swing fists over the last sausage, the barmaid is the only thing standing between a peaceful evening and a full-scale turnip riot. Her rules are simple. Pay up, keep your hands to yourself, and don't spill anything she just poured. If you do break a rule, intentionally or by accident, punishment is swift. You might be on the receiving end of a tongue-lashing sharp enough to curdle milk, or, if you're really unlucky, find yourself mopping the floor with the infamous communal rag. The women of the tavern aren't just serving drinks, they're serving judgment, community, and occasionally medical attention. Need a bandage? Ask Edith. She's got a stash of clean rags and zero sympathy. Have a secret to share? Marjorie has heard it all and will keep it to herself, unless it's too good not to swap for a better one from a rival tavern. Looking to escape an unwanted admirer? Duck behind the bar and let the barmaid accidentally trip him with a well-timed mug to the shin. Barmaids see everything. Who's cheating at dice? Who's on their third tab of the week? Who's quietly crying into their ale? They act as referees, therapists, and the unofficial town crier, delivering gossip with a dry wit and a shrewd sense of timing. Their memory is encyclopedic. Tell Marjorie your birthday once, and she'll remind you with a free mug every year. Insult her taste in pickled onions, and you'll be picking splinters out of your supper until the next harvest. It's not just the barmaids, either. Every so often, a noblewoman, or more often, a farmer's wife, will duck inside, headscarf askew, to collect a wandering husband or take a brief respite from children and chores. Their presence is greeted with knowing smiles and a subtle shifting of the tavern's energy. The volume dips, the jokes get cleaner for about 30 seconds, and someone tries to impress by offering the last piece of cheese. It never works. For the handful of women who choose to drink, the unwritten code is solidarity. They cluster near the bar, swapping stories about livestock and the dubious virtues of various husbands, laughing as loudly as the men. They're here to relax, to reclaim an hour of freedom, and to remind the room that they too have seen and survived worse than spilled ale. Try to pick a fight with one, and you'll find yourself on the receiving end of the entire sisterhood's collective scorn. Through it all, the barmaids keep the night running. They pour, scold, wink, and, when the moment calls for it, lead the next round of song with a voice that carries over even Will the Lute Guy's most determined strumming. They're not just background characters, they are the backbone, the memory, and, on more than one occasion, the savior of the night. So, as you lift your mug, remember, the true power in the tavern doesn't belong to whoever shouts the loudest or drinks the most. It belongs to the women who run the show. Keep the peace, and always, always know where you left your shoes. You thought you knew what funky meant. Now you know better. It's sweat, spilled beer, wet dog, and something faintly medicinal. You breathe through your mouth and hope for the best. The aroma hits you in the chest as soon as you walk in, like a large, damp towel thrown by fate itself. This is not a single smell, but a symphony, a layered orchestra of odors built over years, or possibly centuries, of poor decisions and spilled drinks. Each inhale offers something new, and not always in a good way. Start with the sweat. Not the polite, just, ran, for, the bus kind, but the deep, ancient sweat of people who work the fields all day and believe a brisk rub-down with a turnip counts as hygiene. It seeps into the benches, soaks the rafters, and makes you wonder if perhaps the tavern was originally built around an especially fragrant peasant and never recovered. Then comes the beer, or rather, the collection of beer, freshly poured, recently spilled, partially digested, and fully forgotten. There's always at least one puddle near the hearth, where the scent of malt is enriched with undertones of burnt wood and regret. Ale clings to everything, binding odors together into something stronger, more persistent, and entirely unwilling to be washed out. Next up, the dog. There is always a dog, usually of indeterminate breed, with a coat that absorbs every other scent and amplifies them in damp, rhythmic waves. The dog's official job is to clean up dropped scraps. Its unofficial job is to contribute a constant note of swampy riverbank to the olfactory atmosphere. The regulars don't notice anymore. The dog, too, seems unbothered, having clearly lost all sense of smell as a form of self-defense. There's something sharper beneath the surface. A tang of old onions, crushed garlic, and the herbal sting of whatever concoction the barmaid uses to freshen the air. Sometimes, she tosses a handful of dried rosemary onto the hearth, but the effect is less pleasantly rustic and more witch's kitchen during inventory. That faint medicinal note might be from a healing salve, or just the leftover memory of someone's failed attempt at brewing mead. And then there's the livestock. Not in the food, at least, you hope not, but often in the corner, chewing its cud, making its own subtle contribution. Goat, cow, and sometimes the stray chicken who has escaped dinner for one more night. Their earthy aroma mixes with everything else, rounding out the experience with a barnyard finale. Special mention must go to the furniture. The wooden benches and tables have absorbed decades' worth of humanity. Food, laughter, arguments, and at least one mug of something that has since gained sentience. Every splinter is seasoned, every groove a collector of ancient stains. The result is a subtle, ever-present undernote of museum of forgotten snacks. In summer, add another layer, the unmistakable sweetness of fermenting fruit, forgotten in a corner, and the sharp tang of flies and wasps waging territorial battles over sticky windowsills. In winter, you get wet wool, smouldering peat, and boots drying by the fire, each exhaling its own particular blend of pond and panic. All of these scents swirl together, rising and falling as the door opens, the fire crackles, or someone knocks over a bowl of pottage. If you're lucky, your nose numbs after the first pint. If not, you adapt, leaning into the chaos, finding strange comfort in the knowledge that everyone else is breathing the same historical soup. Eventually, you stop noticing. The tavern's smell becomes a memory, woven into your clothes, your hair, and possibly your soul. Days later, you'll catch a whiff and feel instantly at home, or at least reminded that, in medieval life, surviving the stench was just another part of the adventure. Taverns are the internet of medieval life. Gossip flies faster than arrows. Who's getting married? Who's in debt? Who's growing turnips that look like the local priest? The Boar and Turnip isn't just a tavern, it's the nerve center of the entire village's information network. If you want news, you don't go to the bailiff, the church, or the town crier. You sit at a sticky table, lean in, and listen. The conversations here are a patchwork of whispers, laughter, and the occasional gasp. In a world without newspapers, everything worth knowing, or not knowing, filters through these smoky beams. Tonight, the hottest topic is, naturally, romance. A barmaid, mug in hand, leans over to share the latest. Apparently, Thomas the miller's daughter was seen leaving the hayloft at sunrise, and not alone. Speculation about the identity of her companion is running wild. Was it the baker's apprentice, the new shepherd, or was it, as old Gervais insists, simply the baker's most ambitious sourdough? Then there's marriage news, half celebration, half warning. Marjorie, queen of the bar, announces the upcoming nuptials of Edwin and Matilda, though most patrons are more interested in who didn't get invited and what might happen if Edwin's ex, Edith, decides to show up. Bets are quietly placed on whether the wedding feast will end with a dance, a duel, or both. Scandal isn't just for the young and reckless. The village elders have their own drama, which, by tradition, revolves around land disputes, missing pigs, and accusations of someone moving the property line by a suspicious half-step. These stories morph with every retelling, gaining extra details and participants. By midnight, what started as a missing chicken is a full-blown livestock conspiracy, implicating half the parish and one unfortunate goose. Debts are another favorite topic. No one's finances are private here. Who owes what to whom is public knowledge, with debts catalogued and discussed like rare birds. "Did you hear about the cobbler?" one woman hisses. "Paid his rent in turnips again. If he keeps it up, his shoes will start sprouting." The tavern's honor system is enforced as much by public shame as by the barkeep's ledger. If you're late paying your tab, expect creative reminders woven into the next drinking song. Harvests and farming are also hotly debated, but always with a twist. Someone claims their cabbages are twice as big this year. Cue raised eyebrows and accusations of borrowing night soil from the noble's privy. And every so often, a particularly odd vegetable gets its 15 minutes of fame. Tonight, the star is a turnip that, according to several inebriated witnesses, bears an uncanny resemblance to Father Bernard. Whether this is a miracle or an omen is up for debate. Of course, there's always a darker current running beneath the surface. Who's fallen out of favor? Who's been seen at the witch's hut? Who skipped church last Sunday? Secrets are currency, traded in hushed tones and knowing glances. If you're new in town, don't be surprised if the gossip turns to you, where you came from, why you're here, and most importantly, who you've spoken to since arriving. There's no privacy, only the comfort of knowing your story will be exaggerated into legend by breakfast. Sometimes, the gossip is so outlandish that even the tellers lose track of what's true. But that's part of the fun. It's a group exercise in creativity, judgment, and social glue. For a few hours each night, the woes of medieval life, hardship, hunger, the cold, are replaced by the shared pleasure of stories, scandals, and wild speculation. So you sip your ale, lean a little closer, and listen. In the flickering firelight, every rumor is a little more believable, and every laugh a little warmer. For better or worse, the local tavern keeps the whole village connected. One secret, one snicker, and one suspicious turnip at a time. Drinking games involve chugging, spinning, or licking something unfortunate. Failure means humiliation, or sometimes livestock. You're pretty sure these rules were made up on the spot. In the medieval tavern, drinking isn't just an activity. It's an endurance sport with shifting rules, uneven playing fields, and, more often than not, livestock as the ultimate penalty. The first challenge of the evening usually starts with an innocent enough proposition. Bet you can't finish that in one go. But the pressure is immediate, and the stakes escalate quickly. The regulars have perfected the art of goading newcomers into questionable decisions, all in the name of entertainment and tradition. The classic down the mug is exactly what it sounds like. Finish a brimming tankard of thick, possibly lumpy ale in a single, gasping chug. Succeed, and you'll earn cheers, backslaps, and possibly a spot in the next round of blind pig. Fail, and things take a turn quite literally, as someone will spin you in a circle until you're dizzy enough to mistake the barmaid's goat for your long-lost cousin. Sometimes, failing means you have to recite an embarrassing verse or sing a verse about your own lack of stamina, inventing rhymes about your runny nose and weak liver. Other games involve more creative humiliation. Kiss the Pig is a tavern staple and, thankfully, refers to the live pig that's kept around for just such occasions. Should you come up short, maybe your drink dribbled down your chin or you lost a round of dice, you're ceremoniously escorted to the corner where the pig awaits. You plant a big, noisy kiss on its snout while the crowd erupts in laughter, applause, and a round of pig-related jokes that will haunt you for months. Sometimes the pig looks bored. Sometimes it seems to revel in its role as arbiter of shame. The rules for these games shift with every telling, mostly in favor of the regulars. Someone might invent Spin the Sausage, where you must take a bite of a particularly old and chewy link if the sausage points your way. Other nights, you'll face Dizzy Squire, a game involving walking a straight line after 3 drinks, which no one has ever accomplished. Though Big Anselm claims he once made it to the door before collapsing. It's not just about who can drink the most, though there's plenty of that too. It's about spectacle, camaraderie, and giving everyone a chance to shine, fail, and laugh together. Winners get free drinks, at least in theory. Losers get stories told about them for weeks. In a society where reputation is everything, being able to laugh at yourself, especially with a mouthful of suspicious ale, is a valuable skill. Participation is not optional. The barmaid is often the ringmaster, deciding who plays next and making sure the rules are enforced with equal parts affection and absolute authority. If you try to decline, you'll be met with such feigned shock and mockery that refusing feels far worse than kissing the pig. The regulars know this, and so everyone, from visiting traders to shy farmhands, ends up playing at least once. It's all in good fun, or so you tell yourself as you wipe ale from your chin and try not to make eye contact with the pig. In a world with few luxuries, these games are a communal release, a chance to forget work, debts, aches, and worries for a night. The laughter is loud, the shame is temporary, and the memories, like the stains on the tavern floor, last much longer than anyone cares to admit. As you watch, or participate if you're unlucky, in the next round, you realize in the medieval tavern pride is fleeting, but stories of your drunken exploits will echo for years. So, raise your mug, pucker up, and remember, losing is sometimes the most memorable way to win. There's no Tylenol, only folk cures. Pickled onions, cold water, a gamble, or lying face. Down in the stable until the room stops spinning. Everyone has a hangover remedy, and none of them work. In the medieval tavern, the consequences of a night spent celebrating are immediate and profound. As the dawn creeps in through a grimy window, you wake with a tongue like sandpaper, a head full of angry blacksmiths, and a stomach unsure if it's homesick or just planning a revolt. There's no gentle fix. No, just take two and call me in the morning. There is only suffering. And, because this is the Middle Ages, a folk remedy for every flavor of misery. The regulars are philosophers of pain, each with their own cure passed down by suspicious aunts and experimental neighbors. The most popular option is the pickled onion, a bracing slap to the senses. The theory is that if you eat something strong enough to make you forget your hangover, you must be getting better. One bite in and your body agrees. All other concerns are momentarily replaced by the urgent question of whether you might cry in public. Some swear by cold water, but drinking it is a calculated risk. Sure, it might help rehydrate your battered body. But medieval water is its own kind of roulette wheel, every sip a wager against parasites, dysentery, or a flavor profile best described as yesterday's soup. The boldest among you gulp it anyway, on the grounds that hangover relief is worth a little existential danger. Occasionally, someone tries hair of the boar, a quick swig of leftover ale, reasoning that fighting poison with poison is sound medical advice. Sometimes it helps. Mostly, it just prolongs the agony. Others seek out Marjorie the barmaid, who has a reputation for brewing cures as strong as her tongue. Her remedy? A mug of her infamous special broth, which involves eggs, onions, a pinch of something green, and a dash of mystery. The result is a drink so revolting you'll feel either completely restored or seriously reconsidering your life choices. You'll either be better or forget why you wanted to live, she cackles, watching for your reaction. For the more spiritual, a visit to the local priest is in order. A quick prayer, a drop of holy water, and maybe a warning about the wages of sin. Drink less next time, the priest says, entirely unhelpfully. A few desperate souls seek out the old wise woman on the edge of the village. Her hangover potion involves chewing willow bark, tying a turnip around your neck, and sleeping in the goat pen. She claims it draws out the spirits, but you're left with nothing but a sore neck and some suspicious glances from the goats. Then there's the universal approach. Lying face down in the stable, using a bundle of hay for a pillow, waiting for your senses to return. Some claim the earthy scent of straw grounds the spirit, but mostly it's just the closest soft surface that isn't already occupied by a snoring regular. If the animals look at you with concern, you know you've hit rock bottom. And yet there's comfort in communal misery. The whole tavern is full of sympathetic groans, whispered remedies, and the occasional heroic tale of survival after 5 mugs and a questionable sausage. No matter which cure you choose, one thing remains true. There is no miracle, no quick fix, no magical route. The only real remedy is time, patience, and the promise, always broken, to never drink that much again. As you stagger upright, clutching your head and swearing off ale, until dinner, you join a long, proud line of medieval survivors, living proof that hangovers are eternal and that suffering, when shared and sung about, is almost something to laugh at. Almost. At closing, nobody actually leaves. People sleep wherever they fall, on benches, under tables, sometimes on the dog. If you wake up with both shoes, you're considered lucky. Midnight is a concept that has little meaning in the medieval tavern, where time is marked not by clocks but by the last mug emptied and the final chorus of Ode to the Big Turnip. When the fire burns low and the ale runs out, the tavern transforms from a raucous gathering place into the world's least organized hostel. There are no reservations, no keys, and certainly no do not disturb signs. Only the law of first come, first horizontal. Some regulars claim their preferred sleeping spot with the expertise of a seasoned traveller. Old Gervais always manages to snag the warmest place near the hearth, using a combination of cunning and the world's most persistent snore. Big Anselm prefers a bench, draped over it like a particularly content walrus, snoring so loudly he sometimes drowns out the morning church bells. The luckiest souls land a spot on one of the few reasonably stable tables, flat enough to support their dreams, but wobbly enough to keep sleep interesting. Benches, tables, and chairs are fair game. The floor itself is a patchwork of humanity. Boots serving as pillows, coats as blankets, and an occasional stray turnip acting as a makeshift footrest. The bravest might attempt to sleep near the barmaid's station, but only if they're confident they won't be swept up in the morning cleaning. And then there's the inevitable. Someone inevitably sprawled atop the long-suffering tavern dog, who takes it with a sigh and a weary glance that suggests this isn't the first time, nor will it be the last. Personal space is a modern invention. Here, limbs tangle and heads share the same patch of straw, and nobody blinks if they wake up next to someone with a beard that wasn't there when they fell asleep. You're just grateful for the warmth, the company, and the soft, continuous symphony of snoring, mumbling, and the occasional late-night hiccup. Privacy is a fantasy, one best left outside. Conversations continue in the darkness, quiet confessions and sleepy laughter drifting between the rafters. Someone, half awake, starts singing and is gently shushed by a dozen tired voices. If a baby cries, it's soothed by every available adult within arm's reach. Sometimes with a lullaby, sometimes with a crust of bread. The local goat might wander in, curl up by the fire, and add her own soft bleating to the night's soundtrack. Losing items is inevitable. If you wake up with both shoes and the same cloak you started with, you count yourself among the chosen. More likely, you'll find yourself short a sock, missing a belt, or inexplicably in possession of someone else's hat. Lost and found in a medieval tavern is an informal affair. Anything left behind becomes fair game, bartered or returned with a wink, a joke, or a new rumor about where you might have gone in your sleep. The sunrise seeps in through cracks in the shutters, painting the floor in gentle stripes of gold and dust. The barmaid makes her rounds, stepping over outstretched legs and quietly nudging anyone still too deep in slumber to notice breakfast coming together. Those who can stand do so, stretching stiff limbs and blinking blearily at the new day, while those who can't are given a few extra minutes of mercy. It's an unhurried communal rising. Nobody's rushing to leave a place that feels more like home with every hangover. As you shake off dreams and gather your scattered possessions, you realize this is medieval luxury. Not a private room or a feather bed, but the shared comfort of survival and laughter. If you're warm, you're lucky. If you're among friends, you're richer still. And if you still have both shoes, well, you might just be the luckiest soul in the boar and turnip. You wake up with a headache, a mysterious bruise, and someone else's cloak. Breakfast is leftover ale, cold gruel, and regret. The barkeep sweeps around you, collecting teeth for lost and found. This is the medieval version of the morning after, a blurry descent into daylight that arrives much too soon and with far too much honesty. Your head feels like it's been kicked by a mule with a grudge. The world is tilting at an angle you're not sure you agreed to. The first thing you notice is the chill medieval taverns aren't known for their insulation. The second is the rough texture of the bench, table, or, if you were truly lucky, someone's cloak pressed to your cheek. Somewhere in the confusion, you realize your feet are colder than usual, and yes, you are missing at least one shoe. Around you, the tavern is stirring to life. Regulars are waking up in various states of disrepair, some still half-draped across benches, others sprawled on the floor like casualties of an overzealous nap. Old Gervais is upright already, recounting his dreams to anyone who will listen, none of which sound plausible, but all of which are wildly entertaining. Big Anselm, meanwhile, is discovering that he apparently adopted the tavern goat during the night, who now refuses to leave his side. Breakfast is a ritual that doubles as penance. There's a pot of cold gruel, a thick, grey mass that could have been oats, barley, or just ambitious porridge from last night's dinner. You poke at it with a spoon and wonder if it might poke back. The leftover ale is handed around with the kind of solemnity usually reserved for funerals. Someone mutters about hair of the boar, the medieval answer to a hangover, which is just more ale, presumably on the logic that if you can't fix your headache, you can at least share it with your liver. Regret, of course, is the main course. As you try to piece together the night before, the evidence presents itself. A bruise in the shape of a pewter mug, a single lost sock, a faint taste of mustard, and a head full of questions you're not brave enough to ask out loud. The barkeep sweeps through, deftly sidestepping limbs and gently prodding the more stubborn sleepers with the handle of her broom. She collects teeth, actual teeth, for the lost and found, along with buttons, hats, and one battered lute string. The stories start circulating even before everyone's fully conscious. Who danced on the table? Who challenged the pig to a staring contest and lost? Who sang 3 verses of ode to the big turnip in fluent gibberish before passing out in the hearth? If you were involved, expect to be reminded. If you can't remember, expect to be reminded of things you definitely didn't do but can't quite disprove. There's no shame in any of it. The atmosphere is warm and forgiving, everyone in the same state of battered but cheerful defeat. You lean on each other, swapping scraps of memory and mugs of lukewarm ale, laughing at your own expense because, frankly, what else are you going to do? The collective suffering is almost soothing. If someone's feeling especially rough, the barmaid has a special remedy, a pickled onion, a pat on the back, or a gentle threat involving dish duty. Eventually the room empties, regulars heading out into the daylight, squinting and wincing but a little lighter for having survived another night and morning in the boar and turnip. The hangover will fade. The bruises will heal. The memories, some true, some pure invention, will join the grand tapestry of tavern lore. You step outside, rubbing your eyes, cloak slipping from your shoulders. Definitely not yours, but it'll do. You survived the night, the ale, and the communal embarrassment. And as you limp home, you can't help but think, same time tomorrow? Because in the end, what's a little shame among friends? Just when things get really wild, the town constable sticks his head in, grunts something about keep it down, and leaves. The tavern returns to normal chaos within seconds. Medieval law enforcement is less to serve and protect, and more to check you're not actually burning the place down. The town constable, or night watchman, is the official representative of law and order, a man chosen for his stern glare, robust stomach, and, most importantly, the ability to sleep through a brawl unless it interrupts his evening nap. He's a fixture of village life, instantly recognizable by his patched-up cloak, wooden staff, and the faint aroma of onions, part occupational hazard, part lunch. His job description is vague, but everyone agrees it mostly involves wandering around, peering suspiciously into shadows, and reminding people to keep their shenanigans to a dull roar. He's neither loved nor feared, but merely tolerated, a human milestone that marks the passing of each hour. The ritual begins the moment voices rise above a certain volume, usually right in the middle of Blind Pig, or the second round of who can yell loudest without spilling their drink. The tavern's door creaks open, and in comes the constable, blinking into the smoky haze. He surveys the room with the resigned air of someone who's seen it all, and mostly wishes he hadn't. His staff thumps the floor once, for effect. If he's feeling particularly ambitious, he'll point it at someone who looks especially guilty, which is almost always Big Anselm. Whether or not Anselm is even awake. "Keep it down," he announces, a phrase delivered with the gravitas of a royal decree and the energy of someone whose dinner is getting cold. Sometimes he adds, "Or I'll have to come back," which everyone knows is more threat to himself than to anyone else. No one takes it personally. This is simply part of the tavern's ecosystem. A little comic relief to break up the monotony of ale and arguments. The regulars nod solemnly, promising to behave. The newcomers, not yet attuned to the rhythm, fall briefly silent. The lute player might pause mid-strum. And even Marjorie, the barmaid, offers a faint smile, knowing full well that the piece will last only as long as it takes the door to shut behind him. Once he's gone, the volume creeps back up, songs restart mid-verse, and someone resumes arm wrestling the goat. The constable, for his part, is not looking for trouble. His true goal is to avoid paperwork and possibly to collect a free drink on his next round. He has an unspoken agreement with Marjorie. As long as the windows stay intact and nobody leaves with more than minor bruises, he'll look the other way. On rare nights when things really do get out of hand, a table broken, a noble's hat lost to the fire, the constable will sigh, step in, and restore order with all the authority of a mildly annoyed schoolmaster. The consequences are typically mild: a stern talking, 2, a round of apologies, or a night spent sweeping the tavern floor, which, honestly, is more of a punishment than jail. Behind the scenes, everyone knows the real enforcers are the barmaids and Marjorie's club. The constable is a friendly buffer, a symbolic gesture to the outside world that order is being kept. As for the chaos, well, that's half the reason anyone comes to the Boar and Turnip in the first place. So when the door swings open and the constable makes his hourly appearance, you nod along, grateful that the law is just awake enough to keep the wolves at bay, but not so awake as to ruin the party. In a world where real trouble lurks everywhere, a sleepy constable with a soft spot for ale is just about the perfect kind of law enforcement. And as soon as he's gone, it's back to singing, shouting, and living another night 1 decibel and one small rebellion at a time. Every tavern has a house special, a drink so strong it's technically a crime in 3 countries. Only the bravest, or least intelligent, try it, and nobody ever remembers what's in it. At the Boar and Turnip, the house special is spoken of with a mix of awe, terror, and poorly disguised curiosity. It's not on any menu. It's not advertised with a chalkboard sign. It exists mostly as a whispered dare, a medieval rite of passage for anyone foolish enough to utter the fateful words, "I'll try something new." Rumors swirl about the ingredients. Some say it starts with leftover ale, the kind too murky even for old Gervais, blended with the dregs of cider, a generous splash of homemade mead, and a mysterious dark liquid Marjorie keeps in a bottle hidden under the bar. Others claim the secret is in the herbs, nettle for bite, wormwood for that unmistakable aftershock, and something green and possibly still alive. There's talk of it being aged in a barrel once used for pickling onions, or that it involves a ritual conducted during the last full moon. Nobody knows for sure, and Marjorie is certainly not telling. Ordering the house special is a public event. The regulars fall silent as soon as you make the request. The barmaid raises an eyebrow, asks, "Are you sure?" with genuine concern. And then, if you don't back down, she retrieves a mug from a shelf that looks like it's seen more emergencies than the local healer. The pour itself is a performance. A bit from this jug, a ladle from that crock, a pinch of dried something, And then, just before handing it over, a quick, silent nod to the dog, perhaps for luck, perhaps as a warning. The house special doesn't smell like anything you recognize. It's sharp, smoky, slightly sweet, with a hint of distant thunder and something that reminds you of the time you accidentally licked a toadstool. The color is a murky, shifting brown that seems to absorb candlelight, and the foam sits on top with the confidence of a cat on a windowsill. The bravest souls knock it back in one go. The wiser ones sip and instantly regret every decision leading up to this moment. The effects are immediate and memorable, though not in a way anyone has ever been able to properly describe. Some say it brings on visions, brief, dazzling flashes of past harvests, lost loves, or the location of that one missing shoe. Others claim it just makes you sweat, laugh, and hiccup at such velocity that the dog hides under the table. It's not unheard of for someone to compose an impromptu song or announce a marriage proposal to the house goat or, on one infamous occasion, to a loaf of bread. A few insist the house special cured their gout. A few more blame it for starting it. Nobody finishes the house special unchanged. If you survive, you're a minor legend. The regulars buy you around, and the barmaid gives you a rare look of respect, plus a glass of water, just in case. If you don't finish, your mug is quietly whisked away, and your courage, or lack thereof, becomes the subject of gossip until someone else is brave enough to try. No one knows what's really in the house special, and that's probably for the best. In a world without warning labels or ingredient lists, mystery is half the magic, and all the danger. Tomorrow, you might not remember what you drank, but everyone else in the tavern will. The taste may fade, but the legend will linger, woven into the smoky rafters and shared with every new fool who dares to order the usual but stranger. Finally, the big question. Why did everyone drink so much? Because life was hard, winters were long, and the soup was actively trying to kill you. In the end, a night at the tavern was a rare chance to forget, to laugh, and to survive, at least until the next round. For medieval folk, grabbing a drink wasn't just a pastime, it was a core survival tactic, right up there with not angering the Lord's bailiff or remembering which mushrooms definitely weren't food. Life was a grind of endless repetition. Wake at dawn, labor until your bones complained, eat something brown, and pray your bread didn't contain a bonus fungus with hallucinogenic side effects. There was no vacation, no Netflix, no indoor plumbing, just the constant company of hunger, cold, and aches that started in your 20s and never let up. Work was unending, the kind that ground your spirit and your spine in equal measure. Fields didn't plow themselves, and even the lucky few who lived in towns faced the daily joy of hauling water, dodging angry geese, and trying to survive another week of boiled turnips. After a day spent outside in the rain or inside with the fleas, the tavern's smoky glow was more than a comfort. It was a lifeline. It wasn't just the back-breaking labor or the questionable hygiene that sent people to the tavern, but the sheer unpredictability of daily life. One bad winter could wipe out a family's grain supply. A single cough in the wrong month could mean a visit from the village priest instead of the healer. The church bell didn't just signal prayer. It was also a reminder that you might be next. Faced with the harshness of a world so often out of their control, medieval people reached for the one thing that could dull the sharp edges: ale. And not just any ale. Ale that was safer than water, warmer than home, and shared with people who understood exactly what you were running from. It was the universal anesthetic, numbing hunger and heartache, smoothing over insults, aches, and the memory of last week's soup. A mug of something, anything, was the small rebellion against fate, the gods, and the turnip stew that just wouldn't quit. But the tavern wasn't only about forgetting. It was also about connecting. In a world where travel meant a muddy walk to the next village, and letters were the privilege of the rich, the tavern was the social network, the therapist's office, the community center, And the news feed. Gossip, laughter, music, and games. Each round brought the promise of a new story, a new friend, or just a warm place to sit out the storm. And, yes, sometimes it was just about survival. When the stew looked back at you, when your boots grew mold, or when you lost your last turnip to the neighbor's goat, a night of drinks and laughter in a crowded room made the world seem just a little less relentless. For a few hours, you could be the hero of your own story, winner of Blind Pig, champion of the arm wrestling bench, or even the star of the next song about questionable decisions. By the end of the night, bellies were fuller, hearts lighter, and problems temporarily drowned beneath a sea of sticky mugs. Tomorrow would come soon enough, with all its aches, chores, and another helping of reality soup. But tonight, you escaped. You laughed. You lived. And maybe, just maybe, you remembered that in a world designed to grind you down, a little joy, however fleeting, was worth every last drop. So, another round? Absolutely. After all, there's always something to forget and something to celebrate. You scan the tavern and try to take in the interior design, which is best described as post-plague chic. Antlers on every wall, mismatched chairs with names carved into them, and, oddly, a live goose perched on the bar, eyeing you like it knows your internet search history. The walls are stained with centuries of spilled drinks, and what you hope is candle wax. In the Middle Ages, interior design was less about color palettes and more about survival, and showing off whatever hadn't been repossessed by the Lord or eaten by last year's famine. The tavern is the living scrapbook of everyone who's ever set foot inside. Its walls are a timeline of stains, repairs, and mementos, each with a story nobody quite remembers but everyone is sure they were present for. First, the antlers. They're everywhere. Above the door, behind the bar, even nailed to the privy for reasons best not discussed. Were they hunted trophies? Did they belong to the infamous stag of 67? The one that supposedly terrorized the village until it became next week's stew? Or were they found, sun-bleached and unclaimed, brought in as good luck charms, or simply as free wall hooks for cloaks and hats? Whatever the truth, they serve as silent witnesses to a century of drunken boasts, arguments, and one memorable attempt at jousting with broomsticks. Next, you notice the furniture, not a matching chair in sight. Each one tells its own story in the form of knife carvings, stains, and varying numbers of legs. Some seats are old enough to have hosted 5 generations of the same family. And look it. Names and crude pictures are scratched into the backs, immortalizing loves, grudges, and at least one truly haunting drawing of what might be a horse or might be somebody's cousin. The tables tilt, the benches wobble, but nobody minds. In fact, the challenge of balancing your mug is seen as a test of character. Lighting is a creative endeavor. Candles of all shapes and sizes are wedged into whatever will hold them. Empty bottles, clay jars, or the cracked skull of a long-forgotten pig. The light they provide is uneven at best, throwing shadows that dance along the walls and make the stains look even more mysterious. Occasionally, a gust of wind will blow through the door, snuff out half the candles, and plunge the room into a brief, dramatic darkness, just long enough for someone to steal a sausage or for the dog to claim your seat. Then there are the boots. Old pairs hang from hooks above the hearth, each one with a story. Some were left behind by travelers who passed out, others by those who left in a hurry or not at all. They're lucky charms, warnings, and occasionally impromptu drinking vessels when the mugs run short. The barmaid swears that one particularly battered boot was once used to win a bet, though nobody can remember what the wager was. And finally, the goose. It's unclear if the goose is a mascot, a security system, or just a squatter who refuses to leave. It presides over the bar with an expression of withering judgment, honking occasionally to punctuate a bad joke or to dissuade particularly rowdy behavior. Some say the goose can predict the weather. Others claim it's just there to collect gossip, and the occasional bread crust. Either way, no one challenges its authority. Together, these oddities create an atmosphere that's equal parts homey and hazardous. The decor is a communal collage, built up over years of feasting, fighting, and surviving whatever the world threw at the village. It's not comfortable by modern standards, but it's unmistakably alive, full of stories, and a constant reminder that history is not just something you read about. It's something you sit in, lean against, and try not to spill your ale on. Trying to catch someone's eye over a flickering tallow candle is a contact sport. Flirting means spilling half your ale in the general direction of your intended, complimenting their turnip harvest, and comparing boils. If things go well, you might end the night sharing a bench, a secret, and a case of the hiccups. Courtship in a medieval tavern is not for the faint of heart or the thin of skin. Forget bouquets, poetry, and swiping right. Romance here is all about courage, timing, and an acceptance of the fact that everyone in the room is eavesdropping on your every awkward advance. The air is thick with possibility and, let's be honest, a healthy dose of livestock aroma. Somewhere between the chorus of a drinking song and the third round of blind pig, someone works up the nerve to make the first move. The first step is proximity, which in a packed tavern usually means accidentally elbowing someone in the ribs while squeezing onto a wobbly bench. Personal space is a luxury no one can afford, so you're forced into instant intimacy. Ideal for romance, less ideal for maintaining the illusion that you smell like anything other than sweat and boiled onions. Your opening line? That's a fine sack of turnips you brought in tonight, or, if you're feeling especially daring, is that your goat or are you just happy to see me? Physical appearance is judged with a different set of standards. Clear skin is suspicious. A missing tooth is a badge of experience. And a good set of calloused hands is downright irresistible. Warts and boils are more likely to be a topic of conversation than a deal breaker. I see you survived last winter's rash, you might say, earning a proud grin and an enthusiastic comparison of scars. Beauty is less about symmetry and more about survival. If you can still dance on a sticky floor after 3 mugs of ale, you're halfway to marriage material. Compliments are a blend of agricultural appraisal and health updates. Your cabbages looked enormous at market is considered a swoon-worthy declaration. You barely coughed all through Lent is a subtle way of saying, I think you're strong enough to help with the spring planting. Some bring gifts, a wilted wildflower, a slightly bruised apple, or a handful of chicken feathers. If you're truly smitten, you might even offer a bit of your own bread. A gesture so intimate, it practically guarantees the local gossip will know by sunrise. The flirting escalates with the help of communal games and a little liquid courage. A clumsy toast is made in your honor, though half the mug lands in your lap. You're challenged to a dance, which is less a waltz and more a contest of who can stay upright longest. Stories are swapped, jokes are told, and if your would-be sweetheart laughs hard enough, you may even graduate to sharing a trencher. Just don't mention who used the spoon last. Of course, there are hazards. The risk of rejection is high, especially if your rival is Anselm, the arm wrestler, or Marjorie's cousin with the suspiciously full head of hair. But the tavern is forgiving. Failure means only a bruised ego and a new verse added to a drinking song. Success, on the other hand, means a warm spot to share at closing time. Maybe a shy smile over breakfast, and, if all goes well, a budding romance that will be the talk of the village for weeks. In the end, flirting in the Middle Ages is less about charm and more about resilience. A willingness to laugh at yourself, to share your best or only bread, and to find joy in another person's company, boils and all. If you're lucky, you'll stumble your way into love, or at least into a memorable night, and in a world this tough, that's more than enough. Meet Marjorie, the tavern owner, 5 feet tall, 9 feet of attitude, and the only person who knows which barrel hasn't got a rat in it. She settles disputes, hands out drinks, and sometimes pulls a rotten tooth with her bare hands. She's part manager, part medic, and entirely not to be crossed. Marjorie is the beating heart of the boar and turnip, the force of nature who holds the entire operation together through sheer willpower and a scowl that could curdle cream. She moves through the chaos of the tavern like a general surveying a battlefield, swift, decisive, and somehow always aware of who's trying to cheat at dice or sneak a second helping of sausage. No one quite remembers how long she's been in charge. It feels like she's always been there, as eternal as the stains on the ceiling or the ancient, wobbling benches. Her reputation precedes her. She's the undisputed referee in every argument, settling disputes with a mix of common sense, humor, and, if needed, a heavy ladle to the knuckles. If two regulars get into a shouting match over who last paid their tab or who stole the best spot by the fire, Marjorie appears at their side as if conjured by the mere scent of trouble. Her judgment is swift, and her memory is flawless. She knows which farmer tried to water down his ale last month, and which shepherd left without paying in the spring of 78. But Marjorie is more than just the enforcer. She's the soul of hospitality. If hospitality can be served with a side of tough love and blistering sarcasm, she doles out drinks with a heavy hand and a running commentary, greeting regulars by name and newcomers with a look that sizes them up in 3 seconds flat. If you pass her test, you get a smile rare, or at least a mug filled to the brim, frequent. Fail, and you might find yourself fetching firewood or scrubbing the tables before you've even finished your first ale. Her skills don't end at the bar. Need a wound cleaned, a splinter removed, or a tooth yanked? Marjorie's got you covered. In a world where the local barber surgeon is usually drunk himself, or, worse, at the next village, Marjorie fills the gap with a practical, no-nonsense approach to medicine. She'll slap on a poultice made from whatever herbs are at hand, wrap you up in a cleanish cloth, and send you home with stern instructions and a warning not to bite on anything harder than porridge. The barmaid crew answers to Marjorie, and woe to the customer who mistakes their efficiency for weakness. Marjorie has their backs, always. More than one rowdy patron has been thrown out the door for disrespecting her staff, sometimes landing face first in a snowdrift, sometimes in the pigsty. Either way, they don't make that mistake twice. Despite her tough exterior, Marjorie has her soft spots, carefully hidden, naturally. She'll slip an extra crust of bread to a child whose family is struggling, or quietly pay the bailiff to look the other way when a neighbor needs a place to sleep off a bad night. Every birthday she leads a rousing, slightly off-key version of Many Years and Few Lice for whoever is celebrating, and she remembers everyone's favorite drink, even if she pretends otherwise. Marjorie is the glue that holds the tavern together, the keeper of secrets, the manager of chaos, and the unofficial guardian of every lost soul who stumbles through the door. Without her, the boar and turnip would fall apart faster than you can say house special. So, if you find yourself in her domain, raise your mug and toast the one true ruler of the night. And if she tells you which barrel to avoid, for the love of all that's holy, listen. Midnight strikes, or at least the rooster gives up, and the question isn't will you pass out, but where? Under a bench, slumped against the hearth, or outside in the cabbage patch. You'll awaken to the gentle nudge of a pig's nose or the business end of the barmaid's broom. Losing consciousness is practically the house special. In a medieval tavern, there's no shame in falling asleep mid-revelry. In fact, it's one of the few activities everyone can agree on. The only real suspense comes from guessing where your body will finally surrender. The competition is fierce, the variety endless, and the stories get better every year. The prime real estate is, of course, near the fire. Not only does the hearth offer precious warmth, but it also puts you within range of the morning bread and whatever scraps survived the late-night snacking. Old Gervais has claimed this spot for so long that some believe he's actually part of the furniture. Try to nudge him over, and you'll receive a sleepy elbow to the ribs and a rambling monologue about how things were better before pillows. Benches are another favorite, if you can find one that's not already full of snoring regulars, drooling dogs, or the occasional goat who wandered in for her share of the fun. Sleeping on a medieval bench requires a certain physical resilience. The wood is hard, the legs are uneven, and the whole thing has a tendency to tip over at the worst possible moment. More than one unsuspecting napper has woken up on the floor, cradling a mug and wondering how gravity got so personal. Then there's the under-table option. A classic for anyone hoping to avoid a midnight lecture from Marjorie, the ever-watchful tavern owner. The darkness provides a sense of privacy, even if the table legs offer no actual support. Sometimes you'll share your hiding spot with a fellow party casualty or a family of mice with equally questionable judgment. No one judges. The tavern's unwritten motto is, "You sleep where you drop." Outdoors has its own allure, particularly on balmy nights or after a heated game of blind pig. The cabbage patch is notorious for its comfort, soft leaves, gentle moonlight, and the strong possibility of waking up with a new appreciation for vegetables. The downside, of course, is the likelihood of a rude awakening courtesy of the local livestock or, worse, the village children on their early morning rounds. Some unlucky souls end up in stranger places. The woodpile out back, curled up with the axe, the horse trough, if you've really lost track of the evening, or sprawled across the doorstep, halfway in and halfway out, leaving passers-by to step over your boots and speculate about your drinking prowess. No matter where you land, the experience is the same. You drift off to the fading sound of laughter, clinking mugs, and the off-key lullaby of Will the Loot Guy. Sleep comes fast and deep, broken only by the occasional nudge, the thump of a mug falling nearby, or the unmistakable sensation of someone trying to borrow your cloak as an extra pillow. Come morning, the tavern is a patchwork quilt of sprawled humanity. Everyone wakes with a crick in their neck, and a story to add to the growing legend of that one night. If you're lucky, you find yourself indoors, a little warmer and slightly less damp than the unfortunate souls on cabbage duty. If you're not, you shrug, brush off the straw, and stagger back inside, ready to swap tales and nurse whatever mystery brews you collected. Passing out in a medieval tavern isn't defeat, it's tradition. It's an essential part of the experience. Proof that you made the most of another night at the Boar and Turnip. If you wake up with both shoes and a new friend, consider it a bonus. If not, just remember, the real challenge was never staying conscious. It was surviving the night with a sense of humor and a halfway decent story. No medieval tavern experience is complete without a wandering minstrel, usually named Will or something you can't pronounce. He shows up with a battered instrument, a head full of ballads, and a voice somewhere between charming and barn owl in distress. He'll serenade the crowd with tales of knights, lost love, and suspiciously specific local scandals. Will the minstrel is part troubadour, part news anchor, part living cautionary tale. He appears in the doorway just as the tavern's energy is hitting its peak, or possibly its lowest ebb, depending on the state of the ale barrel. His arrival is heralded by the gentle clatter of loose coins, groans from the regulars who've heard his greatest hits for the 100th time, and the hopeful wag of the tavern dog's tail. Everyone knows that Will is good for at least a bite of crust or a dropped sausage. His instrument is a lute, or what used to be a lute before half its strings deserted in protest. The rest are held together with bits of twine, old bootlaces, and sheer optimism. Each strum is an act of faith, a roll of the dice. Will this be the night he finally hits the right note? Unlikely, but the crowd roots for him anyway. The first song is always something grand, the ballad of Sir Reginald and the Unfortunate Boar, performed with gusto and a chorus designed for maximum crowd participation. Never mind that no two verses are the same from one night to the next. Half the fun is seeing what new misadventure Sir Reginald will stumble into. The audience is a patchwork of reactions. Old Gervais hums along, convinced he once met Sir Reginald. He didn't. Big Anselm uses the opportunity to steal an extra sausage, while attention is elsewhere. The barmaids roll their eyes but tap their feet, ready to leap in with a harmony or a loud correction if Will gets his facts wrong, which is often. The rest of the patrons are happy just to have a distraction from their empty mugs and the mysterious sticky patch on their table. Minstrel ballads are the medieval version of the news cycle. The latest gossip gets woven into song, whether it's Matilda's runaway pig, the blacksmith's new apprentice, or rumors of a knight passing through 3 villages over. Every tale grows in the telling. By the end of the night, the pig can fly, the apprentice is secretly a wizard, and the knight has sworn a blood feud with the local baker over a loaf of bread. Will's lyrics are equal parts poetic, slanderous, and deeply unoriginal, but his delivery is so enthusiastic that nobody really minds. There's always a love song, usually dedicated to a fair maiden with eyes like turnips and teeth like pearls. Well, some pearls. These serenades are met with giggles, groans, and the occasional thrown onion from the object of his affection. Occasionally, Will tries his hand at something dramatic, a lament for a lost love or a heroic elegy. These moments are taken seriously for about 30 seconds, until someone starts a slow clap or the dog howls along, and the mood swings back to merriment. Sometimes, Will takes requests, often from the bravest or most inebriated patrons, who dare him to rhyme catapult with ale or tax collector with socks. His willingness to try, and fail spectacularly, is part of his charm. Even his hecklers become unwitting collaborators, shouting out suggestions or jumping in with improvised verses of their own. As the night grows late, Will's voice grows hoarse. The lute's remaining strings threaten mutiny, and the last ballad trails off into laughter and applause. Love him or hate him, the wandering minstrel is an essential part of the medieval tavern's tapestry, equal parts entertainer, newsman, and instigator of trouble. If you find yourself humming a ridiculous chorus on your way home, or if your latest misadventure turns up in next week's song, take it as a compliment. In the medieval world, you haven't truly lived until you've been serenaded by Will, the barn owl in distress. Let's take a deep breath, preferably through your nose, not your mouth. Because let's be honest, the medieval tavern air is probably still lingering. Tonight, you survived the sticky benches, the suspicious ale, the heady mix of smoke and gossip, and more than one encounter with an aggressively territorial goose. You drank with peasants, swapped lies with strangers, learned which side of the table to avoid during a brawl, and even sang along to a ballad about someone's tragic turnip. Sure, you lost your dignity, a shoe, and possibly the feeling in your left arm, but you made it through the night, a little grimmier, a lot thirstier, but somehow still smiling. Because as absurd and uncomfortable as medieval tavern life was, people showed up anyway. Night after night, they chose laughter over loneliness, stories over silence, and the promise of warm ale over the certainty of cold reality. The world was hard, the beds were harder. But for a few hours, under a thatched roof and a haze of questionable music, even the poorest soul could be king, or at least the hero of the world's worst drinking contest. So as you tuck yourself into a clean bed tonight, with central heating and indoor plumbing, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to those medieval survivors, the ones who risked food poisoning for a good story and a few moments of camaraderie. Their stubborn hope, their ridiculous resilience, and their ability to dance on tables despite the odds are stitched into every night out we have, whether it's at a quiet bar or under your own cozy blanket. History may be sticky, smoky, and sometimes loud enough to rattle your dreams, but it's proof that people, no matter the century, find a way to laugh, to gather, and to stumble home together. So close your eyes, rest easy, and let yourself drift into the gentle chaos of sleep, knowing the only thing you'll wake up with is a pillow, not a hangover or a goose. Good night.